What's going on, Tamers? It's me, East, the guy who has almost finished his video backlog, thank the heavens. Side note, you guys ever do that thing where you are really tired till you sleep, but then you sleep so long that when you wake up you're tired again? Yeah, it feels like that's a pretty good indication of where I'm at in life right now. So finally catching up to current time, we just finished up the third week of the EX06 Infernal Ascension meta for the Digimon TCG over here in Japan and the rest of Asia. Despite how similar the results from the first 2 weeks of this meta have been, third week shows a bit of a shift for what I assume to be two main reasons. The first reason is going to be the fact that new toy syndrome, like shiny new toy syndrome, is starting to wear off. For folks who've been watching these meta reports for a while now, then you probably recognize that Japan has a habit of really testing out the newer decks that are released, whether or not they're the strongest decks in the game. And my second hypothesis is that the Scramble and the promo Ace cards that were introduced at the World's Finals are starting to pop up and appear in deck lists, which means these are going to be shifting around just a bit. Now, with these two things in mind, we have a lot to talk about this week, so let's take a look at some event results, a couple of key takeaways, and a close look at some of the decks that topped over the course of the past week. So diving into this week's results, it feels like even though the 7 Great Demon Lords deck is the most represented deck in the game for the third week in a row, it feels like their grip is loosening on the game right now. That's because the split between them and the other decks is only by 2 wins. Most folks are starting to flock back to the armor decks that were really strong in BT16, as well as trying out the new Angels or the 3 Great Angels deck that was introduced in EX6. I think another reason this Angel deck has started to creep up is because folks are flocking back to just raw Magnamon or Rapidmon X instead of going with the Vaccine armor that we've seen before in the past, which has created some space for Patamon and the rest of the Vaccine engine to try out something different. I gotta say, between the armors, the Vaccine engine, the Angels, and Numemon, Ukamon, if you're a yellow player right now, you're so spoiled for choice in the game. And then dropping down to the rookie level, kind of a strange bump of Belphemon decks the past week. The deck isn't using any of the new promo cards introduced, and the list haven't really changed from the past, so it's kind of an interesting shift to see this deck kind of pop up again. But there are decks that can take advantage of some of the new cards. For example, we see Shine Greymon here, who can use the Scramble cards to pull back an Agumon, who can then make one of your Marcus Tamers a Digimon to attack for the turn. And if your opponent has some big blockers in the way, you can Digivolve him into the Agumon Ace, who can wipe out a total of 14,000 DP on the board. Other decks that have been experimenting with some of the new Scramble and promo cards include things like the Digipolice or D-Brigade deck, as well as Duke or Gallantmon, my favorite deck right now to play, as well as things like just Red-Black Greymon. And stay tuned, because we're going to take a look at some of those decks in just a minute. The first deck that we're going to take a look at is going to be an example of the Angel deck that I mentioned that's been popping up this week. This deck puts together what I feel are all of the best parts of the Vaccine engine that we've seen in the past in one nice package. At the level 3s, we've got the ever-popular Patamon, who lets you Digivolve from security, as well as the new EX6 Luxmon card, which essentially lets you search out 2 cards whenever he's played. The level 4s also sport some strong choices in things like the Secret Rare Angemon card, as well as 4 copies of the Gatomon that lets you play it whenever it's discarded from security. The fact that it has Barrier and it gives Barrier in Inheritance is very strong when we talk about the Dominimon for the deck as well. Strangely enough, I didn't expect to see this, but it's 3 copies of the BT8 Angemon. For folks who don't remember this guy, he is a bit of a heavy evolve cost at 3, but maybe you can offset that with the Patamon or the 4 copies of Emissary of Hope here. But his effect is whenever you have 3 security or less and you Digivolve this guy, you get to recover 1. And as we move to level 5s here, this is where I think the deck truly becomes very scary. We've got 4 copies of the Angemon Ace here, who can recover as well as give DP minus out on the board, as well as the Magna Angemon here. Now, he is the card that you want to see in security whenever you play Dominimon. So Dominimon lets you play an Angel from security, and the Magna Angemon here, whenever he's played, lets you immediately Digivolve from security as well at cost -2. You also have the option here of not Digivolving this guy and then holding on to him for one of the Ace cards in the Cherubimon Ace or the Valkyremon Ace. And if this is truly your aim and your opponent does have a Digimon on board, you see the 2 copies of the Raizu Ludamon here, who essentially has what I would call taunt, where you pay 2 memory, slot him under a Digimon, and one of your opponent's Digimon has to attack at the start of their main phase. So for example, you slot this guy underneath the Magna Angemon, and then you can force out the Ace the next turn. And when you might normally be concerned about losing your Ace card and having to suffer the overflow gpenalty, the power of the Gatomon's barrier effect, as well as the Dominimon's effect to pop off a security whenever one of your Angels will be destroyed, means that these guys can stick around for a long time. And then finally here, the 2 copies of the Psychemon is just because cards like Dexmon can ruin this deck's day, as well as decks like the Great Demon Lords or Royal Knights could be problematic as well. The next list I want to show off is one that incorporates the new promo Scramble cards as well as some of the Ace cards introduced at the World's Finals. So Gallantmon's new coat of paint is one that sports the new promo Ace card in the Megadramon here, who is like the first Ace card who saves himself whenever he's destroyed the first time, and then gives you a really good inheritance effect, insofar as buffing your Digimon's DP-based deletion abilities by 5,000 for that stack. And this functions well when you look at the bottom end of the deck, where it seems like most of this stuff doesn't want to survive. You've got the promo Guillemon here, who gets card draw on attack. We've got the Guillemon here who gets rush whenever he's played. And in the case of the EX3 cards like the Digimon I mentioned before and the Growlmon here, they have 3000 DP based deletion effects, where with the Megadramon Ace underneath them, it becomes 8000. What I think makes this deck really scary right now is the fact that even if their board is clear, you still have to worry about a lot of different threats. Things like the Digimon here from PT13, the Royal Knight set, who can just be played at cost minus whenever you have cards in trash and your opponent has cards in trash. You've also got the 4-cost Takato Tamer here, who lets you basically play a Digimon and then warp Digivolve him into level 6 if you have the cards in trash you need, as well as the Megadramon Ace, who's a just cheap cost. And then you also have these Scramble cards who can bring back some of the Digimon cards to make swings, in the case of the Digimon here from EX, I believe, 4, who has Rush. Something I'm a little surprised to see here is that there's actually no starter deck Digimon in this list at all, where you have the ability to warp from a Tamer. The starter deck Digimon also lets you just warp from the Digimon himself. So you can keep him in raising, your board gets wiped, you pull him out, and then go into a level 6 immediately. I personally think this deck can fill a really niche spot in the game right now, where there are lots of decks that bank on the fact that you cannot remove their entire board. Things like Numamon or the Armor decks. This one with lots of deletion effects, as well as the BT12 Raid Gallantmon, means they can keep the board clear pretty well. And the final deck that we're going to be showing off today is going to be that of the D-Brigade or Digipolice deck you see here. This one sports a pinch of some of the new cards in one copy of the new Cyberdramon, as well as one copy of the new Black Scramble. The Cyberdramon here is useful because you don't really have an easy way to play out your Tamers in this deck. In the case of the Satsuki Tamer, you don't actually have any of the Numamon. It seems like this guy opted to go with the Hover Espimon, and we'll talk about this choice in just a moment. You also don't have an easy way to play out your Zhuyu Lin Tamer because there's no Ryudamon in this deck to normally play her down. If you move over to the right fan of the deck here, you see the one copy of the Supreme Connection. I think that the Hover Espimon here is because you want to make sure that every card in this deck is searchable by this card's effect, and because Numamon is a mollusk and not a cyborg or machine, you would not be able to search him, whereas the Hover Espimon is technically a cheaper cost, and even though it doesn't get Rush or combo with the Sasuke Tamer, it does give you some either card draw or memory back when you Digivolve into it. This card is also useful because it reduces the cost of things like the Cyberdramon, as well as any of the level 5s, level 6s in the deck. Things like the Cargadramons here, the one copy of the Tankdramon. It's kind of surprising here that they would have a couple more copies of this guy in the deck, considering how good the removal effect is, as well as the BT4 Darkdramon, who can reduce his play cost by sending cards back to the top of the deck. The level 6s are a little misleading. They actually have 2 copies of Brigade Dramon here. This guy wanted to show off his like alt art versions front and center, so he did that, but we've got 2 copies of the Brigade Dramon, 1 copy of the BT4 Darkdramon, like I mentioned just a second ago, as well as 2 copies of, I think this is the EX3 or EX4 Darkdramon. The one thing that does worry me about this list a little bit is that when you actually get out the Black Scramble card after you get the Digivolve for a lower cost and you want to use the delay effect on a later turn, what exactly are you doing? My best guess is that you're playing out one of the Command-Dramon for a search, maybe to find your Darkdramon to make a final swing. But outside of that, I'm not really sure what the deck aims to do with it. One last bit here. I think this card right here on the top right is a little hard to see. This is actually one copy of the Vitamon Ace. I'm really interested to see how more copies of the Cyberdramon might be useful for this deck, as well as maybe pulling out the 2 Hover Espimon and then slotting back in 2 of the Digipolice Numamon in order to get the rush effect whenever I play them from the Black Scramble card. Just a great case that I think there's a lot to explore with this deck with the addition of the new promos. And so with that, we're going to wrap up the 3rd week of the EX06 Infernal Ascension meta over here in Japan and the rest of Asia. Feels like the game is in a really good place right now. We've got lots of testing with the new promo ace cards as well as the scramble cards. We've got BT17 right around the corner. There's just lots of ways to play the game right now, and there's lots to explore. Speaking of, let me know some of the decks and the promo cards you guys are interested in exploring when you get your hands on them in the comments below. Anyways, folks, I'm going to get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.